I felt that the magnitude of that responsibility every single time I held my little one for the first time. And it's the weight of the world. You're like, I want to make sure you're safe, and I want to make sure that I'm creating a space or a world for you, or helping to create a path where you can just thrive and be and grow into the human that you're going to be.
I know that this is a public health issue. And it is, right? When something is killing a lot of children, which you just mentioned, it's the leading cause of death for children under the age of 18, not cancer, not motor vehicle accidents, it's gun violence.
Me knowing that, I had to do something. I had to get off the sidelines and figure out how I was using my voice, my time, my talent to do something about it.
Hello and welcome back to the show. It is Dr. Mona, and if you are watching this, you are on our YouTube channel. And as a reminder, you have to subscribe to the channel, hit that thumbs up sign, because that's how this show can continue to grow. I love the Pete's Doc Talk podcast because we get to talk about child development, child health, parenting, misinformation, but none of that is possible without child safety. And one of those areas is gun violence. Many of you have seen people wearing orange or heard about Wear Orange Day, a movement to honor lives impacted by gun violence and bring communities together around prevention. And that's really the heart of what we're talking about today. I'm a pediatrician. I'm married to an ER doctor. We see gun violence every day and the impact it has on families. And this is why I'm taking a part of this so that we can spread the word and get people on the show to promote advocacy and awareness of what's at stake here. So I'm so honored to welcome Angela Ferrell-Zabala, who's the first ever executive director of Moms Demand Action, where she leads and grows the largest grassroots network in the gun violence prevention space. She travels across the country supporting and mobilizing volunteers, from rallying in state houses for advocacy days to working with community partners to helping elect volunteers turned candidates. As a lifelong organizer, Angela is passionate about movement building, uplifting and centering marginalized voices, and empowering the next generation of leaders. She's a mother of 4 and a lover of music, art, dance, and theater. Angela, thank you for taking your time today to join me.
Dr. Mona, it's so exciting to be here with you today. Thank you for inviting me.
And as I said in the intro, this platform, Pete's Doc Talk, I talk about it like it's my own talk show, because it kind of is, right? I mean, I've created this media platform, whether it's on YouTube, podcast, social media, where I not only individually get to educate and promote advocacy about various topics, I get to invite people like yourself on the show. And so I'm excited to connect, not only today, but I know this is going to be a networking conversation for the future, and how myself and my community can stay involved with you. And you are now the executive director of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, one of the largest grassroots movements addressing gun violence in the country. But before this national role, you were also a mom raising 4 kids. A lot of my listeners are parents or care for children in some way. Can you share the moment that first pulled you into this work, and how your experience as a mother shaped the way you stepped into this advocacy role?
Yes, thank you for that question. Before I answer that, I just want to say thank you for your work and your leadership, because I think when we think about pediatricians and those that are giving care to children, it's just so important. And I think this working together and having this conversation is really incredible. So yeah, you're a mom, you get it. When I have twins, and then I have 2 little ones, the singletons. And I think for me, I've always wanted to be a mom, and it's such an incredible responsibility. And I felt that the magnitude of that responsibility every single time I held my little one for the first time. And it's the weight of the world. You're like, I want to make sure you're safe, and I want to make sure that I'm creating a space or a world for you, or helping to create a path where you can just thrive and be and grow into the human that you're going to be. And every single time I had a child, that was what it was reinforced. But not only was it about my own children, I started thinking broadly about these little humans that come into the world and what our responsibility is to them. So, of course, when we think about violence prevention, gun violence prevention, which happens to be the leading cause of death for children in this country, not childhood cancer, as you know, not car accidents, but gun violence. Me knowing that, I had to do something. I had to get off the sidelines and figure out how I was using my voice, my time, my talent to do something about it. So I think that's really what sparked it, was looking into the eyes of my children, but also seeing other folks. And by the way, learning about all of the parents that have had to unfortunately bury their children, or
Yeah.
children that are impacted because whether it's trauma or injury because of firearm violence. So there was no other choice but for me to step up.
Well, I'm so glad you did, and it resonates so deeply. I was a pediatrician before I became a mother, and I don't know if a lot of people know this, but I started my Peds Doc Talk platform like as a social media channel, right? Instagram. And it was a result of being burnt out in my clinical profession. I just felt like I didn't have enough time. But also what I was finding was happening is on my personal Instagram, which no longer really exists because I post on Peds Doc Talk. I would do advocacy on my personal Instagram. And one of the advocacy was about gun violence. And so I do posts. And then I started realizing I'm like, not all of my personal family members need this information, and maybe I need a bigger platform. And so then I was like, why don't I create a better platform, bigger, that's focused on child health, advocacy, all of it? And that was sort of part of the inspiration as well, seeing a problem and saying to myself, well, how can I use my voice and advocacy to create a bigger impact? And I said it in the intro, and my husband's an ER doctor. I'm a pediatrician. As a general pediatrician, I don't see the acuity of a kid being shot in my office, right? Because I'm not an ER doctor. But my husband, he has seen that, right? He has seen local gun violence, mass shootings. He's seen that, and he's had to stabilize or unfortunately tell family members that they've died. And so that perspective, plus me seeing those young kids, maybe their parent died from gun violence, or just to speak transparently, I was working in South Florida when the Parkland Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooting happened.
Yeah.
And although I wasn't practicing in the exact city, that permeated our entire community. And we had children who were so scared, whether they were living in our area or had friends who had died at that school. And that impact, all of the school shootings that have happened before then, how change is never happening. It all just started to really compound. And then you become a mom and you're like, okay, like, where are the change makers? Like, why are we not doing anything? And I think what's happening right now, Angela, is that it just feels like it's more constant in the news cycle. And many parents in my community tell me that they feel overwhelmed or even numb because it can seem so big and unchangeable. When you
Yes.
talk to communities through Mom Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, how do you help people move from that feeling of helplessness into believing that progress is possible?
Yes, a very good question, because it can feel like pushing a mountain up a mountain, or,
Mhm.
sometimes it feels, I've had people say, I just throw my hands up because what am I going to do? It's inevitable. But I have to remind people this is not an inevitability. And I do that in a couple of different ways. First of all, before I came to this work, I did work in different, what I would call social justice or movement
Mhm.
areas related to ensuring, primarily, my focus is women and families, but making sure that folks are set up for success, that communities can be healthy, communities can thrive, and that we have pathways to tackling some of the concerns and problems that folks are facing. And I saw women in particular as central to that, especially as being mothers, oftentimes the people that are multitasking and figuring out how to navigate community and holding community up in many ways. And so when I'm going out and about, the two things that I think about are, one, I think about kind of historically and just think
Mhm.
about the life of this country. How amazing that we've had people throughout time stand up for things and
Yeah.
ideals that were meant to broaden and make sure broader swaths of the population could actually experience a meaningful, fruitful life. And I see that as similar. And so when I can mark back and I can have those conversations of times when maybe something wasn't, this is a time before, when we think about childhood safety, seatbelts, car seats,
Yeah.
things like that weren't a thing. I remember being, I'm not going to give my age, Dr. Mona, but I certainly was in a time pre-seatbelts for a little bit,
Yeah.
back of a station wagon rolling all around, having the best time of my
I
life.
think I was in the bridge generation of that
Near
because
the
I have memories
bridge.
in the back of a trunk, like a, SUV
That's what I
trunk,
mean.
and
Yeah.
hanging out. So I think I was on that bridge, so you're not
I think
aging
we're probably in
yourself.
a similar place, but I
Yeah,
remember rolling around and doing all
yeah.
of that, and it took unfortunately, tragedy and harm. And then people standing up to say, we have to demand better. It can't just be patchwork. And so there's many examples you can look at of that happening. So this country has set us up in a way that we understand how to see a problem and how to solve it together. And there's different levers we can pull. We can talk about that a little later. But I basically let folks know that you, I don't care how small you think it is, you even have a conversation with a family member,
Yeah.
a parent, another parent, if your kid is going to go on a play date or something, about these kinds of things that are basic common sense safety measures that you take to protect your child, then it actually lessens this idea of I have to know everything or be able to change policy or do this. No, a simple conversation. So when I have those conversations with people, and this is really when you think about Moms Demand Action, that is where it comes from. It's about an individual that is looking, they may have either themselves be a survivor of gun violence, have seen something, or just feel like they need to lend their voice to this cause. And then they figure out like what it is I can be doing in my community. What gifts do I have? What time do I have? What experience do I have? And it's that simple, one step at a time, and you have no idea the kind of progress we can make together.
Ooh, I love that. And I love that you're bringing up looking at your strengths, right? And I always say in advocacy, there's not one right way to do it, right? I give the example that I now have this online platform. What I love doing is online platform education, right? Maybe it's a social media post, podcast like this. I've never really been the rallier, like the go to a protest, like whether it's a peaceful protest or not. I've just never been that person. And maybe one day I will. I think I would like to be, but
Yeah,
my advocacy looks different than maybe someone else's. Like, but you have to think and pick and choose what you feel comfortable with, but do.
that's right.
Like, we're not going to change the world if we don't do. And I love your positivity. I had Shannon Watts on my show, who is one of the founding members of Moms Demand Action. But I also had someone named Sharon McMahon. I don't know if you're familiar with who she
Yeah,
is. She does a lot of government education. She's like America's government teacher, and she talked exactly what you said about we can't let the people who are trying to make us feel hopeless win, right? That when you're
yeah,
feeling hopeless, that's a sign that you actually care so deeply. And like you said, let's do something about it. And
and we
that
can.
reminder is so beautiful.
Yes. Yes, and we can. And I love what you said. And I just want to put some emphasis on this. When you think about this, I like to think about it as an ecosystem, right? When
Hmm.
we think about ecosystems, there is a lot of things that are working together, supporting each other. Not everything has to be the same. And that's the same when you're talking about change. We all come collectively together to figure out what can I can contribute, what can you. The beauty of this, we're actually in this movement together.
Yeah.
And you are doing it from a lens that is so important because I am not a pediatrician. I am not a medical doctor. And also thinking about your husband as an ER doctor. You mentioned that he's on the back end of things. He's often trying to help to bring people out of a moment of crisis or a tragedy, to patch them up, to get them. You're on the front end, which is really beautiful because you can start to have these conversations or you can notice things. So that is important along with me doing what I'm doing so that we can move it. So I think we all have a place in this ecosystem when it comes to keeping our kids and communities safe.
Yeah, and my husband, what he sees mostly is not the mass shootings, right? And I think the media tends to show more of that, but me and you both know that a lot of gun violence is not just the mass shootings, which of course
Right.
are so sad and hard to hear, but it shows up in many different ways, gun related suicides, domestic violence involving firearms, police gun violence, hate crimes, there's, just the access and availability of guns and the gun violence that can happen with it. Can you help listeners understand the broader picture of how gun violence can touch communities across the country and why that conversation matters when we talk about solutions?
Yeah, it's so important because the crisis is so vast. I believe it was under the last administration, this was marked as a public health crisis, which
Yeah.
I think is great to look at it from that perspective because the way that you then intervene, the measures you take look different. It's not just, it's not just one-off things happening, but this is something that we are collectively have to look at from every level that we can. And so it's so vast. So that means there's not a one size all solution to this crisis. And you mentioned we often hear things about mass shootings or school shootings, which, by the way, are horrific.
Hmm.
No, none of these are good things. When you start to look at the number, again, I'm just going to just emphasize that it doesn't matter if there's one mass shooting or 100, they're all horrible.
Yeah.
And especially when you think about people at the other end of that, there is a survivor, whether it's someone's life was stolen or they're surviving the trauma of it or injured. And so we take all of it seriously. But when we think about largely, there are all kinds of daily gun violence that happens. Someone in a place, they're just walking to go to the store and something happens, or they're in a movie theater, something happens. We think about folks that ideate, maybe there's something, they're in a really hard moment in their lives and they make this a choice that cannot be, oftentimes when we think about firearms, it makes it fatal and deadly. And so there's all kinds of ways. I'd like to also mention there's unintentional shootings that happen all the time when we think about kids.
Yeah.
Someone that thinks they're hiding away their firearm and a child finds it and they're curious. I mean, I can't even hide Christmas presents from my kids. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not being securely stored and tragedy ensues. So, a lot of that is happening, and a strong movement means it's diverse. The movement. That means we think about all the different ways that gun violence is impacting all the different communities, which means there's different solutions that have to happen to those. And we need voices from people that are most impacted by this crisis to help weigh on the solutions, which is really important. So when we think about like addressing gun suicide, we need secure storage laws. We need red flag laws. We need lots of mental health support and resources coming in. When we address violent gun crime in cities, we need to give people access to housing, education, jobs, food, all those things that we're addressing root cause. And we think about like domestic gun violence, we need laws that prevent abusers from getting access to guns, because we know once they have access, that person, usually women in these cases, are 5 times more likely to die by gun violence. So there's all kinds of ways to look at this, and we need everyone's voice, and we need to really examine this from all levels.
One of the hardest things about being a pediatrician is we don't have enough time and visits, right, to go over all of the anticipatory guidance we want to go through with families, also just handle what we need to. And one of the things in residency that we had to talk a lot about was gun violence education about, if you do have a firearm in your home. And where I practiced in residency, there was a lot of gun owners, right? And so we'd have to talk to them about, hey, if you have a firearm, please make sure you lock the ammunition and the gun separate locations in a locked
Right.
cabinet. All of that was happening. And people don't realize that pediatricians are constantly doing that work. Like you said, we all play our role in this ecosystem, and it gets draining sometimes, because then you see the violence come in, you see that accident or hear it on the news, which you mentioned, like a child who accidentally shoots their sibling or shoots their parent with
Yes.
truly an accident, like a small child, or shoots themselves because they're playing with what they think is a toy. And it's hard to see. And, I think it's such an important, addition to what you were mentioning about how we all play that role. And I think part of the other frustration that I hear is that we know, I know, that this is a public health issue. And it is, right? When something is killing a lot of children, which you just mentioned, it's the leading cause of death for children under the age of 18, not cancer, not motor vehicle accidents, it's gun violence. And if it was a virus out there that was doing the same thing, we would come up with a vaccine. We did that during the pandemic. If it was something else, everyone would care. But it seems to feel like it's become a polarized political issue, which then can shut down conversation from even happening. So, through your work, what have you learned about having conversations with people who hold opposing political views, or are we actually in the same boat and just coming at it from a different direction? And how can we be less polarized around this topic and come up with a joint collective agreement that this is something that needs to be remedied?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think part of it is like it's a little bit of a knee jerk reaction. I think people are
Yeah.
so used to being, I'm here or there. Like this, when you think about a public health crisis and you think about this crisis in particular that impacts so many communities, but our children at the center of this, then you're going to have to pull away from this idea like you're either here or there and look at it with a lot more nuance. It also means kind of getting out of this defensive posture that often people in, like taking out of politics. It's really not about politics. It's been made to be about
Yeah.
politics, but it really is about keeping our communities and our families safe. And that does not fly in the face of being a gun owner. We have so many gun owners within
Yes.
our network. I have family members that are gun owners. I've actually myself gone to ranges and just learning, understanding the inside out of the different, kind of the different firearms. It's really important to know. Um, and I think when we're in a country where we have lots of gun ownership, and by the way, it's climbing, then we got to be able to make sure that we're addressing that as it is. So you don't go in finger wagging and telling
Yeah.
someone that they're wrong. What we need to do is address this from a place of it's a responsibility. It is a responsibility. And with when you have a privilege like that, which I think it is a privilege to be able to have this, like when you think about this country versus other places, I travel a lot. I love traveling, by the way.
Same.
They don't have the opportunity to be necessarily gun owners, or it's very different. That means your responsibility comes with that. You don't just
Yeah.
have something with no responsibility. So that's where we're kind of we're coming from. And when I've had conversations, I want to say that oftentimes it's the way that this gets framed is from this really high level. You're either on this side or that side. It's like paper or plastic, black or white, up or down.
Yeah.
That's not how we live our lives, right? It's not how we live our lives. And the beauty of this work is that I get to travel all over the country, the reddest of red states, the bluest of blue, the purple, and all in between, and have real conversations with real people that are either parents, gun owners, faith leaders, veterans, business owners, grandparents, educators, medical providers. It's such a privilege to be able to have these conversations, and the majority of people are in the same place. They don't want to go back and forth on like fighting some like an un it's just when we start from a place of like my right versus your right, we've already lost.
Yeah.
We're talking about, of course, this is not anything that flies in the face again of a Second Amendment. What this is saying is, yes, and we have what is our responsibility now to make sure that our folks are safe. So having these conversations, you wouldn't believe it. I've been in some of the places where someone it feels like on paper, if you see us, we have nothing in common. And we end up having such a good, and it's some of my best conversations, a good conversation. And that person at the end is actually telling me something along the lines of, I think I'm a gun owner, but I also think that if someone wants to be a gun owner, there's some basic things that you do. Maybe they should be approved to see if there's anything in their record. So
Yeah.
criminals, people that are prohibited shouldn't. And I said, yes, background checks. So we're not so far apart. But I think in sometimes these political environments, especially nowadays, it's gotten more and more tense. What breaks that is literally just sitting down and having a real conversation with somebody, not in a way that I'm trying to finger wag or because that's not my job. And frankly, that's not what I feel. I feel as a mother of 4 kids, as a person that loves this country, as a person that loves other humans, that
Yeah.
I think that we should be able to come to some solution together and that it's going to take all of us from coming from different backgrounds and understandings to get to a solution that's going to be suitable. So the majority of people I talk to are in the same place we are. And once you start breaking down those walls, there you can find that, they're willing to roll up their sleeves and figure out how we do this together.
I feel like that's where so much of the discussion is lost and so many things public health related. And I love that we keep bringing it back to public health because you're looking at stats, right? You're looking at data. This is a crisis. We can't deny that it's a crisis, right? And I don't think anyone truly can say that they're okay with what's happening in the United States
Right.
when it comes to gun violence, right? Because we are of the developed countries, we are the leading cause, or it is the leading cause, and it's very hard to see that. And I love how you approach it. I think that's so healthy, and it is nice to hear that when you go to talk to the families, the goal is very much the same regardless of party lines, because it can just feel like that it's not, the case. Now, you mentioned about, the background checks and all the things that maybe we could do, which could be its own other episode, like the legislation and all of that. But in from a legislative piece, do we feel as if one of the hardest barriers is that there's no national legislation surrounding how people can obtain guns? Because, for example, in California, it's one way. In Florida, there's open carry. And is that making it just harder to have a clear thing? Or what is kind of our goal here? National legislation, better legislation, or what would you define as sort of winning this piece in terms of gun reform?
Yeah, I would just say, first of all, because again, I'm going to go back to this is the crisis is so big and so multifaceted that
Yeah.
we're approaching it from every layer. It's from a legislative and political to an education piece. There's just so much that is part of the solution here. And I think when you think about what it take the steps that it takes, and then I'm going to talk about some wins because it's always good to hear about what we've been doing. I will just tell you just a little bit of a spoiler alert that over this past, it's been 13 years of Moms Demand Action, going on 14 years, and in
Amazing.
that time we have made tremendous progress, even in terms of having this conversation. This was a third rail of politics in the beginning when Shannon Watts got this popping, like I like to say. This
Yeah.
is not easy for this was
Yeah.
not an easy place to be. We even had, when we think about on the political realm, when you talked about federal legislation and federal level, there was nothing that was happening on the federal level. After Sandy Hook, when this came about, they couldn't even pass federal legislation after like the massacre of kindergartners and
I
first graders
know.
and teachers at a school. We had a quarter of, and again, I'm going to talk about this. I'm not trying to talk about it in a political way, but I just want to give you facts. We had, even on what we would think like people that typically would vote or move in directions when it comes to gun violence prevention and gun safety, Democrats, you had a quarter of them kind of getting an A rating from an NRA. Like,
Yeah.
this was in a place you couldn't even touch this. It was literally the third rail. Now it is opened up in such a way. So this is part of the win, that this is a conversation that everyday people are having because it's impacting so many. That's the sad part about it, is that it has moved to a leading cause of death for kids. It has moved to the fact that over 56% of adults in this country, either themselves or someone they love, identify as a survivor of gun violence. That is hard. So these are real kitchen table conversations now. Keeping your kids safe, taking them to school lockdown drills, going shopping in a supermarket, simple
Yeah.
things like this people have to look at. And so there's been a lot of movement here. And I think part of, when you think about federal versus state, this is not unrealistic when we think about how we're set up as a nation, that there's state by state, there can be different ways that people are approaching an issue, a problem, different ways they're legislating, and you can get a bit of patchwork. But what we do know is that when we start to get some momentum and you have states that are doing some great stuff and working and partnering together, then you can actually push for things that are looking at the federal level. We had the first in almost nearly 30 years, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act that happened under the last administration. I believe that was, now it feels like so long ago, I think that was in
Yeah.
2022 that happened. That was bipartisan, by the way. 15
Yeah.
Republicans voted on that, and that was very important. So that opened up so much federally. I mean, there's still a lot to be done, but I will say, let me just give you a couple wins, and there's so many more, state by state, locality by locality. Some that are recent for me that I think about, top of mind, is Washington. They were addressing 3D printed ghost guns, and that was just last month. This is a newer thing that's coming up. When we think about technology, we have to stay
Yeah.
ahead of it. You can literally print out components and put together a firearm, unserialized, untraceable.
Wow.
No background check has to happen. You just need Wi-Fi and you need to be able to download some files. So that is something that's moving. Washington's addressing. So many other states are kind of stepping up. New York, other places. California last year signed the first and the nation legislation to be able to stop the spread of do-it-yourself machine guns, which is really important. In this legislation, it prohibits gun dealers from selling firearms that can be easily converted into fully automatic weapons through
Mm.
simple installation of a switch. Now, that sounds wild, but we literally had machine guns that have been illegal, like on streets, find them on crime scenes, and it's because they can easily be converted. And then one thing I'd like to say, another layer, is building a bench of people that are willing to stand up and do the right thing on behalf of everybody. That means whether you're a parent, a grandparent, a gun owner or not, like making sure that we have safe communities and we are able to elect many gun sense champions. But one in particular I'm proud of is in Virginia, bellwether for so many things, electing Abigail Spamberger, who is one of our former
Yes.
volunteers, with 13 other Moms Demand Action volunteers in the assembly. That's incredible. So those are just examples of what this looks. People are running and winning on this issue because it is so important to the average person nowadays. It doesn't, I don't care what your zip code is. I don't care how you voted in the last election. Like, I don't care about any of that because this hits you regardless of that. You are impacted regardless of that. And people are starting to see that. And we need to take a human approach to this and take a responsible approach to this, a common sense approach to this that is going to protect our children and our communities. And that's what's happening.
I love hearing the wins. And I think it's motivating to hear that, right? Because again, you can just get so bogged down with like nothing's changing because it doesn't always make the news, right? You just
That's
hear
right.
another school shooting or you hear about shootings at a bar. The most recent one that I can remember, I'm sure there's been more, the one in Austin before
Oh,
the
yes.
recording that we had. And you're just like, what is going on? But to hear that behind the scenes, this is happening. The people are getting elected that have that balanced approach. And then the other thing that you mentioned was the bipartisan nature of some of the bills that have been passed. And I do a lot of education about vaccines on my Instagram and on my socials, and I'm not a fan of the current HHS secretary, which is Robert Kennedy Jr. But I told my audience that if he does something that I like, I will always support it. Like, so there's one thing that happened, which I want to call out because even though I'm against so much of the policy that they do, he wanted to incorporate more farm to table meals in schools. And I was like, that makes sense. Like in, for example, University of Miami and in that area, utilizing local farms to basically have more fresh produce. And I think that's an incredible idea to like get farmers involved, but also create more fresh, less processed foods. And so, thinking about this sort of being okay and saying that my view is one way, but I can see when a party that I don't agree with is making good change is very healthy, right? Like if, for example, if I'm a blue voter and I'm seeing the red political party make change, we can say, you know what, that actually was a good idea. And so I think it's so important to hear that so that we don't create more divide, that you don't understand and you never vote this way. And I agree
Yes.
with you that I think it can just mean more change when we don't come at it with fangs out, ready to attack, that you don't get it, you're not on the same page as me.
Yeah, Dr. Mona, we don't live our lives in vacuums. I mean,
Yes.
I think when we think about our political system, it's not that long ago that we can look back and see bipartisanship. Like
Yeah.
I firmly truly believe that we need representative government. We need to have a little of everything, or else you're walking around with blinders on. You got blind spots. We need to have a little here, sprinkle. We got to understand that when we talk about making this nation great, our nation is great and will continue to thrive and be great because we have the diversity of experience, opinions, understandings, backgrounds. Those things have always historically made us leaders. And so when you think about solving problems, we need everyone coming to the table. And most humans do not approach their life as like, I'm not blue, you're not red.
Right. And
we
you
we're
don't know unless you start really talking. Right. Like you got to, yeah,
Exactly. We're
exactly.
parents, or we're farmers, or we're faith leaders, or we're
Yeah.
doctors, or we're teachers, and we want to interact in community, and we want to feel safe. We want to be able to thrive. That is like where if you start from that, you'd be surprised what we can do together. And I really resist, and I want more people to resist this idea that we're like coming from two different planets. It's not true. And I think it's also the beauty of me being able to travel around and meet with folks is like that literally is not how it works. That is there's a lot of, kind of a small but loud, um, you know, I guess systems and structures would make you believe that. There's also when you think about the extreme of any part of this, like we don't want to be extreme in any way. We want to meet where most people are, and we want to figure out the solutions together as we have done in the past, and we can continue to do together. So I think that's the promise of now. So I'm so glad that you brought that up because it's really important that we continue to kind of not just continue, but we go out of our way to make that so we don't slide into a place where it's like you're over there, I'm over here, we can't talk to each other, we have nothing in common because that's just not true.
And again, I love that the wins. And at the same time, we both know there's still so much work ahead. So as you look forward in the role that you're in as a mom and all the advocacy, what priorities feel most urgent right now? Whether that's advancing state legislation, holding the gun industry accountable, the role of upcoming elections and midterms that may play a role in all this. What do you think it is? And I imagine that there's probably multifactorial, or what else am I missing here as to like what people need to think about as they start to think about where they want to gear their advocacy towards.
Yeah, well, you're summing up for me. Thank you so much. I've always said this, and I mean it. elections have consequences.
Hmm.
So November is a big deal. Like I know there are people like, and look, like I said, I'm a mom of four. My oldest kids are voters now. They've had like two cycles under their belts, and they don't love it. Like at this, different generation. I'm a Gen Xer, and it's like we're about duty, what we do, what we're supposed to
Hmm.
do. My kids are like, wait, well, this doesn't feel right, or this isn't, and this doesn't speak to me. But I said, okay, that's fine. What I need people to understand is like if you're not stepping up and using your voice at the ballot box or supporting programs and candidates and people that are going to have your best interests at heart. And when I say that, I'm thinking your best interest is not just it's yours and your family and your community. When you do that, then we can do so much. So we need to win in November. We need people to step up and not be afraid to stand 10 toes down on behalf of their communities and the safety of their communities. And that means hearing from all kinds of people about their concerns and making the best policy decisions possible to make sure that our children are safe and sound. Legislation is always going to be a thing that we're going to look at. We're passing innovative legislation to stop the flow of do-it-yourself machine guns, like I said.
Yeah.
And we want to do that by holding manufacturers accountable. It's not just about elected officials. We have other people that play a role in this crisis. We want to make sure that we're banning assault weapons and requiring background checks. I mean, that's low bar. Like military, we work with so many military veterans, and I have so many veterans and active duty in my family that this is a big deal right here. Stopping the flow of illegal guns. So we want to combat gun trafficking. That's a huge deal. You might have a state with strong gun lines, but you don't have impenetrable borders. And when
Yeah.
we have traffickers that are straw purchasing and buying these large, like this should put a flag out for people. Why do you need to buy like in a month 30 or 40 guns? What are you doing? Like these
Right.
kinds of things
Exactly.
when it comes to trafficking, these are basic things that we can put into place to stop. Again, it's not about owning a gun. It's about ways that this is illegally happening without any kind of oversight, and also where people are like profiting in crime rings or like getting guns in the hands of prohibited people. That's a problem. Banning Glock switches. We shouldn't have the ability to turn a pistol or a handgun into a machine gun. And then we really want to think about technology and how we get ahead and have laws in place to prevent 3D printing of firearms and other things. Those are just a few things I'm thinking about. And I didn't even say on the legal side or the litigated side to make sure that we're going in and holding accountable folks that are going to be bad actors and not work with us to do the right thing and keep communities safe. So those are just a few things that we'll be working on. And we'd love to have all of you join us in that.
And in all of that, nobody said to take away Second Amendment. And I want to reiterate that, right? Because you said it beautifully at the beginning that we believe in the amendments. I do too. I think they existed. But one of the videos that has really struck a chord with me, and I'm sure you've seen it, is about when the Second Amendment was written and how technology has changed and how we need to rethink a little bit about the laws because it's not always the same. So in
Right.
my opinion, I don't believe any civilian needs to own an AR-15 or a machine gun. Like in my opinion, this is my opinion. I don't know if we agree or is that not true?
I mean, I say I agree as well because
Yeah,
we have just on a civilian street, military grade weapons just
right.
don't belong.
And
And I,
so
again, we have lots
yeah,
of friends and things we work with, and they would agree the same.
so there was a video that was out, and I don't know who the creator of the video is. Maybe you'll know, and I'll make sure to look at it. But there was a video of advert, like a commercial, where a man enters a workplace and he has an old, like 1800 style rifle, and he wants to start shooting his office place, but he has to reload after every shot because that's how old machine guns used to be, right? It wasn't like you could run a whole round of ammunition in one shot. So he would try to shoot, have to get reload. And so then the end scene says, gun technology has changed, so should our laws, right? That now to be able to get ammunition for multiple rounds, to be able to go into a concert, a nightclub, a school, and be able to just take one gun and fire it is much different than what the Second Amendment was created for, right? We didn't have that technology back then. And like to your point, none of us are saying get rid of the gun. We're just saying common sense gun laws so that we don't have these mass casualties that there are. You brought up so many things that I don't think many people have considered, the, across the state lines, and the, obviously we know background checks, and holding corporations liable. But I think this is like all really important information, and it just kind of goes to show how we need to rethink all of that so that we can keep our community safe. And I really respect and appreciate you bringing it back to community, because we tend to think so egocentrically when it comes to public health issues, right? Like, I equate it to vaccines. Well, my body, my choice, my gun, my choice. But with that comes great responsibility, like you mentioned, right? With great power comes great responsibility. So if this beautiful country of ours, which I think is very beautiful and has sometimes been led astray, if we want these responsibilities and want these privileges, there has to be guardrails. Just like we would give guardrails for our children with limits. Like, you
That's
can't
right.
just give free reign.
Because we're in a collective society. And I get
Yes.
it. Like when I talk to people, one of the things that I see with my own eyes because I get to travel to different parts of this country. Is like nothing. It's not a one size fits all anywhere. Like, and that's
Yeah.
very fair when that comes up. Whether you're in more rural area, whether you're in an urban area, exurb, suburban, like there's so much. But we've got to think like collectively about what that looks like because even if you're in a rural area and it's like this makes sense here, this makes sense
Yeah.
for like we don't have closed borders. Those things can move in and out. So we got to think about what it looks like to collectively ensure that if you're a gun owner, it's with common sense laws that are going to allow you to still have the right to have your firearm, but also the responsibility to be amongst other people and understand we have to collectively do this, right? It's not your gun, your laws, your way. You're living in community with other folks. So this is the thing that I agree. We got to look at it from a broader perspective. We got to come to it together because we all have a say in what these solutions look like. But there are lots of things that we already have that are data driven proof of what it looks like to have common sense, responsible gun laws that are going to keep everyone safe, keep gun owners with to be able to responsibly own their guns, keep parents able to keep their kids safe, keep doctors and physicians in a place where they can treat and care for their patients in ways that they're not it's not getting in the way by not having strong gun laws that really make sure that they're protecting us. So we all have a place in this fight, and I'm just really glad that we're having this conversation today.
Yeah. And, you obviously mentioned that elections have consequences. And I know that's one way that we can all do our part in this country. If you feel strongly about this, and I hope you do, vote the people in that have that same mindset, right? That want to have those common sense gun laws. But what are other small or large ways that people can get involved when it comes to advocacy?
Sure. Well, one thing that you can do right now is the communities that you already are in, whether it's family, it's the parent groups, whatever you're working in, having these conversations. Don't be afraid to have them. I think sometimes we're often afraid of like what folks'
Yeah.
response will be. Like you're not going in trying to like a bowl in a china shop. It's just simple as like, I'm concerned about violence in schools or that I saw this on the news. And this is, what are you thinking about this? Or simple things, play date. If you have a firearm, is your firearm? I always say instead of saying, "Do you have a gun?" It's like, is your firearm securely stored? I just want to make sure my kid's going to come over that they don't have access. And the worst that happens is like someone's like, "Oh, yeah, well, yes, I have it. It's secure," or "I don't have a firearm." So
Right.
instead of like putting, and that kind of takes the onus and of someone feeling like you're putting them in a position of like you're like outing them or something. Sometimes it
Yeah.
feels like for
You
some
have a gun. I
yeah,
know
it's
you have a
like a
gun.
bad
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
It's like, "No, I'm a gun owner, I'm responsible." Yeah, of course it's
Yeah.
secure. I'm a responsible gun owner. So, simple things like that. If you wanna get involved with us, we're at the very local level all the way up to kind of state base. You can text, READY to 64433, and we can plug you in the folks that are in your area of all stripes and ways, that will pull you into, like, what's happening locally, and maybe you can jump into that. And I think pay attention. Ask the questions when you hear people that are running, whether it's school board all the way up to president. What does it mean for gun violence prevention? What does it mean for keeping my children safe? Those are just some basic things that you can do. And I would be remiss if I didn't say we can always use support, whether it's a donation, whether it's your time. So reach out to us. We'd be happy to have you. It's going to take all of us to get to the other side of this crisis. And we're looking forward to bringing you in.
I think I'm already on the text chain, or I get updates about what's happening in local events and all that. And I'm involved in many of the grassroots organizations regarding gun violence reform. So again, that number to text is 6443.
64433. Text ready to
23. Perfect.
64433. Yes, 33. And it's
Yeah.
Wear Orange Weekend coming up. So you can also look and see what's happening around your community. There might be events, whether it's beautifying a park or like there's all kinds of things going on. So you should look up and see, you can jump in and help us out with your orange wearing this weekend.
Yes, and we have our orange on, and obviously all these awareness days, these advocacy days are so important to me, but it always means a stepping point to make sure that we continue the conversations beyond this year, which is why I'm so glad that this conversation can live on my show forever. It's going to be evergreen, that people can always get this and learn more about stats that you mentioned, all of the ways to stay involved, and just the real nature of what's happening in America right now. So, Angela, thank you so much for joining me today.
Of course, what a good conversation. And thank you for your work. Oh my gosh, I have so much love and respect for healthcare providers and doctors,
Thank
pediatricians.
you.
Thank you so much for what you do. It's really important.
Thank you. One of the last questions I always have for my guests is, what is making you happy right now? It can be anything, like
Oh
in your
my
life, in your work. What is making you feel joyful right now?
I love being outside. So of course, warm, sunny days are
Yes.
great. I take my kids out, we take walks, walk the dogs, get ice cream, just like living like that, just in those moments is so important. It's so easy to be pulled into all these different directions, but that is what's bringing me joy right now.
And what a reminder as we talk about advocacy, which can feel so heavy sometimes, right? Like we're talking about this conversation that for many parents can feel like dreadful, like it's so hearing the news stories, but taking it back to like the basics of joy. I mean, we all need to do that to be able to keep doing this fight.
We do. And hug your kiddos. Hug
Yes.
them. Hug them.
Connection is key. Oh, Angela, this was wonderful. I know this is not going to be the last time that we connect, whether it's on the podcast or in person. I hope to give you a big orange hug one day, at an event, or, just as whether it's an advocacy event, or, decorating a park, like you said, or whatever it is that we.
Sometime. I'm happy to come to you. I'm traveling all the time. I'll let you know when I'm in your area.
Yes, you will. And for everyone tuning in, I hope you understood that we want to make change here. In order to make change, we have to stay active. We have to stay motivated. We have to understand that there are small wins in a fight that can sometimes feel daunting, and that the needle isn't moving. If you love this conversation, remember you can do your part by sharing it, right? That is a form of spreading the word, the advocacy that you can do. Share it on your social media. Share it with a family member and say, hey, I think you're actually going to really love this conversation. That is how we get more people involved in this conversation. And please make sure you text ready to 64433 to learn more about all of the things that Moms Demand Action are involved in. And I cannot wait to chat with Angela next time and have another amazing guest on the Peds Doc Talk podcast in the future.